speech is going to be education and our freedom to choose. So let me start by thanking you all by coming and listening to my speech, and I'm going to invite you to watch a short clip before we get started.
Having inside of themselves. But the model we have is this. I believe we have a system of education that is modelled on the interests of industrialism and in the image of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Schools are still pretty much organised on factory lines, so ringing bells, separate facilities, specialised into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. We put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? Why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are? It's like the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. Well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, or at different times of the day, or better in small groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. And it's about standardization. I believe we've got to go in the exact opposite direction.
Okay. What Ry Dawson, the man who made this video, I think he would turn off this one. What Ry Dawson goes on to say is that parents have the responsibility in choosing their education and analyzing the education system that we have to decide what their child needs to succeed and what will help them reach their full potential. And obviously there are some major issues with the system that we have in America today. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. First, I'm a teacher in a home type of setting. I work with small children. And I'm also a student. I was homeschooled for all of my grade school education, and now I'm a student through online classes. And I've watched the results of a wide variety of different types of schooling, homeschools, private schools, even boarding school. My brother goes to boarding school. And I've seen a few different examples of children just starting out with this great thirst for learning, and then you watch them as they become older, just having that thirst extinguished. And yeah, so a lot of times it's easy to find fault with the current system, how things are done, but it's not always as easy to notice advantages or alternatives or ways that the current system can be improved. So it is my hope in this speech to present you with 5 alternatives to 5 advantages of the private schooling system. The first advantage is private schooling exercises our freedom as Americans to choose. Parents have the responsibility and the right, as I mentioned earlier, in our country to evaluate the public school system, to evaluate every aspect of their child's life, their child's diet, their weekly schedule, how many programs are crammed into a day of activities, and decide whether that's the best for their children, whether they need less sugar, whether they need more sleep, whether they need more activity, or whether they need a better schooling model. And if they find problems, then it's their responsibility as well to choose a different path for their kids, something that's better. The second advantage of private schooling is that it has the potential to help children succeed much more than public schooling. For example, you can see better results with a lot of public schooling systems rather than private schooling rather than public schooling. One example that I researched was in Santa Barbara, California, which is a very expensive beachside community in California that has a lot of the percentage of the home mortgages, I think, that go to the taxes that go to schooling, and yet their local high schools have some very negative results in testing. According to Dan Lips, the senior policy analyst with the Heritage Foundation, 88% of the high schoolers in Santa Barbara don't meet college requirements. don't pass standard tests for English, which is common language of America. And so another thing about private schooling that allows children to succeed more is that a lot of times they have safer environments. According to David Dinning at the Harvard Graduate School for Education, the D.C. area's 70 public schools reported in 2008 2,379 crime-related incidents, 650 of which were violent crimes, 855 property-related crimes, and 43 reports of gunshots. A third advantage of private schooling over public schooling is that it can be designed to be child-specific. I like to tell two stories about two different children that I've worked with for the past year. First child is Lauren, who's a second grader, and Lauren's story is that in school, she's been held back. She is very advanced in reading, rather advanced in math as well. She's just a very quick learner, has a strong thirst for knowledge. She catches on to concepts very quickly, and yet she's held back by her slow class pace. But the other students just aren't really able to keep up with her, and there isn't much room for her to advance beyond them. She's held back by the rigid curriculum of the public school where she goes. Her teacher only has a certain amount of worksheet that she's allowed to give Lauren, and there's not very many other resources available to the teacher. If the teacher was more motivated, perhaps she could go outside and do some more research and get materials for Lauren to use, but she's not that motivated to use her personal time to benefit Lauren. So the result is that Lauren is bored in school. The second child I'd like to tell you about is Joshua. He's a first grader, and Joshua is underdeveloped. He is overlooked in his class because he's not very self-motivated, he doesn't really put himself out there, and also it would take a lot of energy on the part of the teacher, I feel like, to be able to try to engage with Joshua. And so he's just kind of passed over in class. And his little self-motivation, an attitude of just getting by with as much as he needs to do, but not necessarily a lot of excellence that will help him to really challenge himself and grow in learning. And so the result of Joshua's public schooling experience is that he thinks school is not very fun and just a lot of work. And then the fourth advantage of private schooling over public schooling is that it will raise the quality of public schools by offering some competition. And this was one of the surprising facts that I found, but it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. According to Lindsay Burke, in a meta-analysis published last March, education researcher Greg Forster looked at all of the gold standard empirical studies conducted to date on school choice. Not surprisingly, in nearly every study, the students who participated in school choice showed marked improvement, and no study showed any negative impact on their achievement. But 18 out of 19 studies also showed that in areas where school vouchers and charter schools were offered, students who stayed behind in public schools also had improved outcomes. And this is really what I want to emphasize here, is that the competitive pressure improved public school education in those communities as well. And then the fifth advantage, and the final advantage that I'm going to highlight of private schooling over public schooling, is that it allows us to improve our international comparisons. There's two aspects of this that I would like to highlight. First of all, the ranking of the U.S. in international comparisons. According to an article in 2012 New York Times, in the U.S., only 7% of students reach the advanced level of 8th grade math, while 48% of 8th graders in Singapore and 47% of South Korean 8th graders reach the advanced level. And the U.S. ranked 11th in 4th grade math globally, 9th in 8th grade math, 7th in 4th grade science, and 10th in 8th grade science. And so we can just see a large disparity between the resources that we have as well as the ranking. And that's the second thing I would like to emphasize, is the resources. Barack Obama stated this last April that despite resources that are unmatched anywhere in the world, we have let our grades slip, our schools crumble, our teachers' quality fall short, and other nations outpace us, which I think is kind of getting at the root of the problem, that it's not our resources that are the problem, it's really the system and the way things that are being done as the problem in our education system. Ronald Reagan's education secretary said something similar. He said, if you look at those numbers, you get the story for 30 years. If there's a bottom line, it's that we're spending twice as much money on education as we did in 1983, and yet the results haven't changed all that much. So these are the 5 advantages that I found, just a few of the many reasons why it benefits us as parents and educators to be able to choose what is best for children. So I challenge you as the parents to be able to reevaluate and be confident that it is your right and your responsibility to choose what is best for your child, to consider the advantages of private schooling options. And I hope that this material was thoroughly presented, the implications are clear, and that you're encouraged to know that we have the freedom to choose. And so I challenge you as the parent to choose the better option for your child and consider a form of private education.